Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today, this Saturday morning. My name is Daniela. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at Greenbelt Alliance. So, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Greenbelt Alliance is an environmental nonprofit organization that's been in the Bay Area for over 6 decades. And our mission is to educate, advocate, and collaborate to ensure the Bay Area's lands and communities are resilient to a changing climate. The work we do to protect the Bay Area's natural and agricultural lands while also creating thriving communities and this free outings program is made possible by you. So please donate today, which you can do securely on our website, greenbelt.org/donate. I can also put it in the chat very soon. So during the outing, please feel free to ask questions via the Q&A box or via the chat. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. We'll try to, because we're in a small group today, we can try to answer your questions as we go, or depending on our time, we'll get to the answers at the end. We'll also be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered to this event today, and we'll include a link to the recording, so keep an eye out for that in your inbox. And now I think we're ready to start. I pass it on to Ken, our outings coordinator, who is going to take us on a tarantula trek. So here you go, Ken.
Right. And it's going to be a dual presentation today. Liz Watson will also be, actually there'll be three of us, but you'll find out about that in a couple of minutes. Liz Watson is a Greenbelt Alliance outings leader. If you've been on some of our outings, you've no doubt seen her. In her real life, she's a special ed teacher for Contra Costa County, teaching at Liberty Union High School. And she also teaches hospital-bound students. And Liz holds a California Naturalist certificate, and she's volunteers at the Lindsay Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. So I thought, Mount Diablo is kind of associated with tarantulas. That's what people think of when they think of tarantulas, and sometimes Mount Diablo. But they're actually found many places in the Bay Area. They're found in the South Bay, especially Henry Coe State Park has a festival every year. They're found at Sonoma Regional Park and Briones Regional Park and Black Diamond Mines. The reason they're so closely associated, though, with Mount Diablo is really historical. And I thought we'd start out with just to give you a little bit of the history and why that is, because you have to go back 170 years. And the 1860s, boy, I hope I did the math right, 160 some years. I'm gonna put that in the chat. And that was the great mining era on Mount Diablo, starting in the 1860s. You can imagine some of the unsuccessful gold miners were back in the Bay Area, having washed out in the Sierra Nevada, and they were delighted when there were many opportunities for mining on Mount Diablo. And actually, right in the same time, there were three different types of mining going on. Over in the northern foothills, coal was discovered. On the east side of Mount Diablo was mercury, and in Mitchell Canyon, it was copper. And the mining became so frenetic that these rather austere-looking gentlemen paid a visit, the California Geologic Survey. And we'll hear about them in just a few moments. Well, regard to coal mines, coal mining, that the coal was discovered actually in the 1850s. No one was really interested. They were too busy worrying about gold. But by the 1860s, mining got underway in earnest, and there were five main centers of coal mining in the foothills of Mount Diablo. Actually, it's in Antioch today. It's Black Diamond Mines Regional Preserve. But the five centers of coal mining were Nortonville and Summersville and Stewartsville, Judsonville, and West Hartley. Did that from memory. How do you like that? And for 20 to 30 years, they were the most important coal fields in California. Those coal mines actually fueled the growth of San Francisco and San Jose and Oakland. Now, it wasn't very good quality coal. It was sub-bituminous lignite, which is about the worst you can get. But it had a great economic advantage being so close to San Francisco. So for those decades, right up through the 1880s, these coal mines flourished. And it wasn't until higher quality coal started to come in from Washington State and from Chile that the coal mining faded. So today it's a regional park and we do Greenbelt Alliance outings out there. The regional park actually abuts onto an area where Greenbelt Alliance has done a lot of work to help preserve the urban limit line. The Sand Creek campaign we had last year and is kind of still ongoing. And what you're looking at here, well, you might not recognize it today, but if you've, or what it looked like back in the 1870s, but today this is the site of Summersville. That's where the park entrance is. That's where we start a lot. That's where we start our outings. And one of the things we do is climb up the trail here. The cemetery's still there. Go over the hill, and that's the site of Nortonville on the other side. There's the pass there and there. And Nortonville was the largest town in Contra Costa County at the time. Well, they're all gone today, nothing left. The structures were made of redwood. They were too valuable to leave. So when the mines closed, they disassembled everything and trucked it off for use elsewhere. The mine in Summersville actually lasted until about 1900, and gradually that petered out too. So today, all that's marked there are a few slag heaps. And of course, the regional park has an underground mining museum and mine tours, which we sometimes include in our Greenbelt Alliance outings. But it's really just a beautiful area to go hiking in. One of the shots from our outings. There's Mount Diablo, and sorry, this is a little bit small. I should have got this a bigger picture, but there's actually a little bit of snow on the top of Mount Diablo. So this must have been late winter, early spring. And here we are coming down the pass. Here I am, or here's everybody else walking in a different direction than me for some reason. On the other side, on the north side of the mountain, on the east side of the mountain, on North Peak, that's a little confusing. Mercury was discovered in the 1860s, quicksilver. And that was very important for the gold mining that was still going on. Mercury is a metal that's liquid at room temperature, and it has a peculiar quality. It forms an amalgam with gold. When it gets in the vicinity of gold, it clings onto gold, it grabs it. So if you pour some mercury in a big sluice box, and there's a lot of junk in there, then mercury is going to glomp hold of the gold and leave everything else behind. So from then it makes gold mining a lot easier. All you have to do is boil off the mercury and you're left with pure gold. Of course, you don't want to breathe any of the fumes or you end up like the Mad Hatter. That's a little bit hazardous. And during the 19th century, there was underground mining here. And during the 20th century, it was surface mining. And during World War II, Mount Diablo was the 9th largest producer of mercury in the country. By then, it had military and medical uses. And the mercury mining continued into the late 1950s. And now the property is in private hands. There's a family that bought 100 acres out there, including the mercury mine for some reason. And of course, they immediately became responsible for the cleanup, which they have not done, despite the threats and urgings of our local governments. And today it's quite a problem. There's still mercury leaching from those old mines. Mercury in itself isn't dangerous, but there's a bacteria that reacts with it on the surface and transforms it into methyl mercury, which leaches into Dunn Creek at the bottom of Mount Diablo, into Marsh Creek, and down to Marsh Creek Reservoir. Here's some of the slag heap from the old mercury mining. I don't think I would take a Greenbelt Alliance group there. I think those were docents from Black Diamond Mine that I was helping on an educational field trip. We did encounter one of the old grizzly miners there who came out of and yelled at us to get off of her homestead. And to add insult to injury, the infamous 2013 Morgan fire started at the site of the old mercury mines. And it's kind of been overshadowed by some of our recent fires, but this fire was burned for several days. It caused the evacuation of all the people that had homes and livestock up Morgan Territory Road. And I refer you to our wildfire white paper. These homes were just indefensible where they were built, and they just had to evacuate and hope for the best. And as fate would have it, the fire missed, I think, all the houses. It was a spot fire. It burned much of the north side of Mount Diablo, though. And the next winter, there were mudslides, which damaged the road, and it took several years to repair. So there were consequences to building in this area. And this is one of the more famous pictures. This is from close to where I live one night as the fire was raging. And those of us who do talks on Mount Diablo or Greenbelt outings trying to convince people that Mount Diablo is not a volcano, this was quite a severe setback to us. Here's Mount Diablo in full eruption. But that was the Morgan fire. And afterwards, we had several outings. Here's North Peak after the fire. And the very last mining was copper, was discovered in Mitchell Canyon. And this was actually right up in the wheelhouse of all those miners. Hard rock mining, that's what they knew how to do, and they all flooded into Mitchell Canyon. And if it's possible, they even acted more crazy than they did during the gold rush. One claim got jumped twice in one day. They were shooting each other and going down to Clayton at night and causing a ruckus. They actually had to build a special jail in Clayton for the miners. That's still there. And in fact, these people down in Clayton, they had a saying to describe these miners. You might remember from your California history of all those 49ers that were rushing to the gold fields, the metaphor that they used, they were all going to see the elephant being the representation of gold mining. But the folks in Clayton, they said, all these miners in Mitchell Canyon, they acted so crazy because they had all been bit by the mining tarantula. And these two guys are about to get bitten both literally and figuratively here. So anyway, the California Geologic Survey, as I mentioned, came to Mount Diablo, and they set up camp in Mitchell Canyon in 1861. This is about where Liz and I do our trail walks. There's some picnic benches here now, and we do a little talk. Here's a few of the Geologic Survey. The really important guy is the guy that claimed the rocker there, William Brewer. He kept the journal for the years he was with the Geologic Survey team, and he wrote letters back to his brother in New York describing what California was like in the 1860s. And these guys were all from the East Coast. And when they came out to the wilderness of California, they were very worried. They thought that grizzly bears might grab them, or if they avoided the grizzly bears, the mountain lions would get them. But they had been here for about a year, and they were feeling pretty brave and pretty safe, or pretty proud of themselves that they avoided these pitfalls. But then William Brewer got up one morning early to make breakfast for everybody, and he went to put on his boots, and something crawled out. And he ran to his journal. He wrote, "They've got these spiders on Mount Diablo. They're the size of a half-grown mouse, with fangs the size of a rattlesnake's, and a bite generally considered fatal. Pleasant traveling companions." So that kind of set the stage, and from then on, for the next century and over century and a half, Mount Diablo has really been associated with tarantulas. Here we are, one of our outings. There's the star of the show. We kind of leave the spiders we see on the trail alone. We just admire them from a distance and see what they're up to. And We'll try to figure out, still don't know why the chicken crossed the road, but we do know why the tarantula crossed the road. In just a moment, Liz is going to explain all. But during our little demonstrations, as I say, we don't bother the native tarantulas, but both Liz and I have our own pets that we bring and people can handle. So here's where one of our programs. This is Amy Fleming, who actually she worked for Greenbelt Alliance, and she was quite chagrined when she looked at the fine print. It was actually in her job description, holding tarantulas. You can see she's just testing to make sure it's safe, as I bravely stand off to the side and the kids look on in amazement. And here's Anita Lauani. She used to work for Greenbelt too. See a pattern here with the used to. And you can see this little boy's not quite sure what Anita's up to there, or the spider. But eventually he came around and got to see the spider close up, and I wish I could say it ended well. But anyway, Liz, you have somebody to show us, and then we'll start talking.
Okay, give me one moment here. Okay, see if I could do this here. All right. This is a live tarantula, as you can tell. This is Scarlet O'Hairy. And she's not one of the ones from the mountain. I got her from a pet store. We leave the wild ones free. She is a Chilean rosehair. And most likely she's a female, but we don't know for sure because you really can't tell. It's not like a dog. You can look underneath and all that. So, but I have heard some people say that the females have a tendency to have a bigger body and shorter legs, and the males tend to have the longer legs and smaller body. So I have her in a terrarium here. Tarantulas, they eat other little creatures like crickets and any other creature that has an exoskeleton. And the way they do it, because I always wondered, I have her in a terrarium, but I never see any part of the crickets, because I feed her on average people ask me, so I'm saying that I feed her about a week and a half, 2 weeks. I feed her about 5 large crickets, and that's all she needs. And I have heard that they could go much, much longer without eating. But she typically, it's about up to 2 weeks, but they always need water if you happen to get a pet tarantula from a pet store. It's super cool. These guys have, and we'll talk about the body parts and everything, but these guys you have to, with like a pet tarantula, they have on the ends, and I could feel it. People will say, gosh, they have these little like claws, kind of like a cat. They have 2 or 3 little claws, but they also have these little hairs also and around there. And it's somehow they are able to, and I've had pictures showing this, she's able to climb up the glass to the top. So so they are basically amazing creatures. So that, just amazing creatures that are kind of misunderstood. There are a lot of wonderful facts about them, but also there's misunderstood facts, and some of them we'll go ahead and talk about some of them as we go along. Here she goes. She's on the move right now. She is on the move. So let me go ahead and put her back. Okay.
They eat, so it says they only eat a few crickets, but Liz has had some cats that have gone missing, so I'm not quite sure. Okay, we're back.
Yes.
You don't need to look at that guy. No, he was some student from Germany. Thought that would be funny. I think we must have gone viral back in Germany. So tell us about the body parts, Liz.
Okay, well, these wonderful creatures have 8 legs and 8 eyes. There we go. But sight is not their best sense. Actually, touch is. And they have hairs actually throughout their body that are called setae. And what it is kind of like they're able, their touch, they have very sensitive to everything. I've heard people say, I've did some research and they talk about how it's like little ears for them, even though it's touch. That they're able to know what's going on around them, and they sense you way before you even get to them. So now in the back, they have spinnerets, and those produce the silk, but they don't do regular webs like other spiders do. They use the silk to basically, in their burrows, they're underground. The one on Mount Diablo, the one that you could see on Mount Diablo, they have burrows. They're underground, solitary, and it's about a foot or half a foot deep, and it's about a quarter size opening, nickel to quarter size, I heard. And the silk, you can see a little bit of the silk there, but they have some in the burrow to kind of stabilize it. And then they have it on top to stabilize it, but also to sense what is going on around them and to kind of give them a little warning. They also have, there's been some recent study going that they also have found that some of them also may produce some of that silk on their feet. They came across that. So not only the spinnerets, but also the feet. They have they have the helping hands there in front. We call them the helping hands. And those guys basically help with digging, reproduction, a variety of things. Of course, they have exoskeletons, and so they grow bigger by molting. And people on our walks, when you see a molt, one of the molts, it's amazing because you look like it totally is another tarantula. You have practically all the body parts there. And I've had with Scarlett, I've had her, she's molted several times since I've had her. And it is like I come in the morning and look at the terrarium, and all of a sudden I see 2 tarantulas. It is amazing. Everything, fangs, everything is molted. And it's they do it a number of times when they're young. As they mature, you don't see them molting as much, but it's just they still do molt, but not as often, and that's how they get bigger. So everything there you could see in the picture, everything is brand new, and it's super sensitive. These guys, for the first few days, our first couple days, they're very vulnerable. They really go into hiding because the exoskeleton, their body is soft. Everything is soft. So they have to have everything hardened for them to be able to, have whatever may come, any predators that may come their way, to kind of defend themselves. They have these hairs in the back as well, the barbed hairs that basically they use as a defense mechanism. And they have it, and we'll talk more about some of the predators, but they use them to shoot the hairs when they get scared. That's their first defense mechanism. They shoot the hairs and on the predator's eyes, or just the face, and have them, or body, and just have them just be able to just move away from them. Any other, Ken, anything else you want to mention?
Remember, it's spider's got 2 body parts, not 3 like insects. It's got the abdomen, where the spinnerets and the urticating hairs are, and actually all the vital organs. And then it's got the head and the thorax are combined, a cephalothorax. And all the legs are attached to the cephalothorax. And Liz mentioned the pedipalps we'll talk about. And these 2 little guys up there, if you can see, those are the chelicerae. They cover the fangs. And then sitting on top are a cluster of 8 little eyes looking straight up, seeing only light and dark. So there's what happens. So these guys are all molting, and you said we can't tell the boys from the girls very easily. But what happens? What happens when the males molt for the last time?
So
Pull themselves out.
So with tarantulas, like I mentioned, they molt, and they reach adulthood, typically 4 to 7 years. And so the males and the females reach maturity about the same time. The one big difference with the males is when they molt that last time, once they reach maturity, they get these little hooks there underneath on the front legs. Yes. And those guys are used for the mating process. And so they go out from their burrows looking for females.
So this is they're never going to go back to their burrows. They leave late summer after that last molt. And that's what people call the great tarantula migration. It's only the mature females. They're not migrating anywhere. They got one thing left to do in their lives. They're never going to molt again. They're never going to eat again. They got to find a girlfriend, as the second graders say. They've got to find a female. And you can imagine how difficult that is when your eyes are pointed straight up and you can only see light and dark. And so, yeah. Scientists think that probably the female's sending out some pheromones to help the male spider along. But if he's lucky, comes to a female's burrow, and then he's got to get her to come out. So he taps at the top. So if you're a female down there and you've been down there for half a dozen years, what is it usually when there's something walking around out there? It's usually dinner time. So she comes rushing out, she rears up to strike down, and that's where those 2 little hooks, the tibial spurs that Liz talked about, come in handy. He's got to hook her fangs so they can mate. And Liz was lucky enough to, one of our outings, she actually was able to record this. Watch.
Oh, look at that.
Go ahead, Liz, you can do the commentary here. We don't have the porno music to play in the background, but go ahead.
So there's the male on the outside, the female on the inside. So tap, tap, tap. He may tap, 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 and she thinks, oh, it's dinner. She comes out. He takes his hooks and he goes to her fangs and grabs a hold of the fangs. And then they go ahead and mate. And it's a pretty quick process there. And then when they're done,
gets her up. Yeah.
So
there's some difficulty there. He's ready before he, right after he, before he left his burrow for the last time. He made a little sheet of silk and deposited the sperm on that, and like hypodermic needles in those 2 feelers, the pedipalps. He drew up the sperm into those pedipalps, so they're loaded and ready to go. So all he has to do once he finds the female and gets to this point, which is with great difficulty, he sticks one pedipalp into her epigastral slit, and if he gets away with it, he sticks the other one in. And then he's got to run away quickly before she remembers what she came out of there in the first place for. But generally, female spiders don't kill the males. I mean, you can see these guys are the same size. Male looks to be even a little bit bigger.
There we go, that's perfect. You can see the bodies
So,
now.
only rare cases will the female go after the male. You know, they can mate multiple times, the females can. And if she's already mated with 2 or 3 in the same season, the 4th one that comes along, you know, I got a headache, dear. And she may get a little aggressive there. I mean, I've seen male tarantulas missing a pedipulp and a leg, but she might go after him if she knows she needs a protein meal to be able to lay eggs. But generally, she just lets him go. But he never goes home again. He just goes out looking for another female. And eventually, he'll die when the cold weather comes, or a predator may get him, or he may starve to death. So it's the end of the line for the males. But not so the females. How long do the females live, and what's their next job, Liz?
Okay, so well, the males, like we were saying, the males reach maturity as well as the females, 4 to 7 years. But, and as Ken said, that's basically for the males. That's basically the end. They just are out there looking for females, and that's their last season. For the females, they can live as long as 20, 25 years. So a lot longer. So once the female goes back down after they have mated, she defers the fertilization process. So come early springtime, she ends up laying the eggs and is put in a sack, as you see the little sack there, little egg sack. And in the spring, and basically they hatch, and you have anywhere from like 100 to 200 eggs, little itty bitty pin size little eggs. And when they hatch, the spiderlings, they basically, some of their food, the protein they eat, their actual egg sacs, the actual eggs. They're part of the egg. And they stay with mama, and she's a fantastic mom until after the first molt, first molt or the second molt. And they then need to leave that burrow and find the get a burrow for themselves. One thing I forgot to mention with the egg sac, mom, like I said, moms are great, the tarantulas are great moms. And what they do is she will take the sac and bring it up to the top of the burrow to have them, warm in the sun or what have you. And then she'll bring it down. And so she has this whole process. So she's a fantastic mom to those eggs and to the spiderlings until after the first molt. Anything you want to add to that, Ken?
That's great. And it's fun. Well, they're great moms, but they're not great housekeepers. They usually don't bother to remove the old egg sac until it's fall and they're ready to greet visitors again, and then they do the house cleaning. So you can see, so tarantulas, interesting fact here. Nobody in the entire history of the world has ever been killed by a tarantula, no person. 3,000 people die of scorpion bites each year, 0 die of tarantulas bites, if you could get one to bite you. They do have venom, but not poisonous to people at all, just about good enough to take down a cricket or a beetle. And if a larger predator, say a bobcat or a coyote or come along, or a fox, the tarantulas will go up on their hind legs and kind of bare their fangs at you, try to scare you off. If that doesn't work, they have to go to plan B, which Liz already described. This guy is already irritated at me for taking the picture. The rear end goes up, the abdomen, and all those little urticating hairs, he can kick a cloud of those off really quickly. And if those get in your nose and you're a fox, you'll start sneezing, and the tarantula uses that time to make us escape. No, not too
One-
fierce. So how did they get their? Do you want to say this? Do you want to say
Yeah,
something?
one thing can I mention about the venom is there's some studies going on now that they're talking about that the venom has actually some medicinal purposes or could potentially have. And some are with pain and addiction, and also for epilepsy. So they're doing studies on that. So the venom could potentially have some good purposes, and no, most
So not
people
only
have
is
basically not always true,
it not
but
hard,
they are studying, but they are studying it.
yeah. So go get bit by a tarantula. Well,
But they're
it's
doing
hard.
studies. So yeah.
They don't like the bite. So how did they get their bad reputation? Well, you have to go back to the Middle Ages in Italy. People would be out harvesting the grapes, the peasants, and of course it's late summer and fall, and they'd see big hairy spiders walking along that they call tarantulas. Actually, it was a European wolf spider that looks an awful lot like tarantulas. They called it a tarantula, and
Lycosa tarantula.
all of a sudden, someone would start to feel ill, and they'd see two little bite marks, usually on their rear end. They'd see the tarantulas walking around, and they figured they had been bitten by the tarantula, which was funny because they didn't feel it at the time. Well, they started to get headachy and get cramps, and back then, no doctors nearby, and they figured the best way to get rid of that venom was to sweat it out. So they would start jumping around, doing a frenetic dance. Of course, it was so much fun, everybody pretended to have been bitten, and pretty soon everybody would be dancing around. And you can see here's a fellow with a violin. That was actually a good gig. If you were a musician, you would hire yourself out in the fall and late summer to various vineyards, and you'd play for people that had been bitten by the tarantulas so they could do their dance. That was their big gig of the year. Well, it turned out it wasn't a tarantula biting them at all. It's a European black widow. And you don't usually even feel the bite, but it does have venom that can make you sick. And by the time they were feeling sick, well, the black widow was back in hiding, and who got the blame? The poor tarantula. And we all know the dance named for the tarantula, the dance they used to dance. Oh, that's your cue, Liz.
The tarantello.
Tarantella, yeah.
Tarantella, yes.
And
So
next time you watch The Godfather, the wedding scene, they're dancing to a tarantella. Marlon Brando got bit by the tarantula. And it's always been like that. Remember the Harry Belafonte song? I won't sing it for you. The Deus song, and the deadly black tarantula coming out of the bananas that had been shipped from Central America. The dock workers would stick their hands in the crates to pull out the bananas, and all of a sudden they get bit. And then they see a tarantula crawl out. Well, the tarantulas were, they accidentally got shipped off with the bananas, but they were the ones doing the biting. Tiny little venomous spiders were also inadvertently stuck in the bananas, and they were the ones that were doing the biting. And again, it was the poor tarantula that got blamed. So, yeah. So you can see these guys are pretty innocuous. Here's a male. You can see the little mating stirrup there. And the miners at the time, they kind of figured out that the tarantulas, it was kind of overblown. They would actually, William Brewer described the miners catching tarantulas, they catch males, and then they put them in a little ring and have tarantula fights and bet on the tarantulas. They don't like each other very much. They kind of stay away from each other when they can. Another thing that the miners would do on Mount Diablo, they'd catch the tarantulas, stick them in their little duffel sack, and when they found a tenderfoot new person around, they would take out the tarantula, pretend to have been bitten, because the antidote for a tarantula bite was whiskey. That's how they got shots of whiskey. And tarantula whiskey became known as tarantula juice. And here's Liz hard at work doing some research in Virginia City. At this point, I think her blood alcohol is about 1.2. She still has a funny look on her face, but she's still vertical at least. But here's the tarantula juice.
It was at the Washoe Club, if anybody knows that historic location in Virginia City, Nevada, and just came across it. And yeah, the tarantula juice, which was basically a concoction of some adult beverage drinks. And basically what would happen is, which would cause muscle spasms. And so they would feel like they are baby tarantulas. So that was, that's what I've heard. That's the story. So anyway, so that's how tarantula juice, that's the story behind the tarantula juice.
There's Liz, always hard at work doing research.
Yeah.
Bar that's around the Greenbelt Alliance. And of course, tarantulas, you see them in a lot of movies, where, arachnophobia type movies. And the reason tarantulas are so popular is they're harmless to the actors. They never tell you how many tarantulas were injured in the making of movies, but no actors. And my all-time favorite was one of the first. I think it was from 1955. They still play it on TCM around Halloween. The great title, Tarantula. John Agar was in it. He was in a bunch of those sci-fi movies in the 50s. And Leo G. Carroll, remember him? He was the English actor. He was in a lot of Alfred Hitchcock movies, I think North by Northwest. Cosmo Topper, Mr. Waverly from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. But in this movie, he's a scientist out in the desert who's trying to come up with an elixir to grow things huge, to kind of solve the world's food problems. Unfortunately, the experiment goes awry and a tarantula gets doused by the elixir that Leo G. Carroll's working on. And the next thing you know, there's giant tarantulas walking down, terrorizing Arizona desert, which probably would have been gone unnoticed, except I think was headed towards Las Vegas or something. But here's the local law enforcement with some explosives out. This may have been one of Liz's tarantula walks in Mitchell Canyon. I can't remember. I think it's, they've got dynamite there. Of course, that's not going to work with the tarantula. It just kept on going. So finally, they had to call in the Air Force and called in an Air Force squadron that it took a couple of passes and quite a few bombs and I think some napalm, but that did in the tarantula. And that's funny, that movie, the head of the the Air Force squadron, the jet squadron that killed the tarantula, it was an actor who went on to become extremely famous, both an actor and a director. This was his first movie role. He didn't get any credits and he only had one line. He said, on the next pass, we'll drop 2 bombs each. You never saw his entire face because of his oxygen mask, only the top part. Does anybody know who that actor was? Can you tell from the picture there? Go ahead and write it in the Q&A or something if you know. Liz knows. Only because I gave her the movie for Christmas, I think. Anybody answer, Daniela?
Oh, Marlon Brando. There's one.
No, I myself.
Oh, you did that.
No, he wouldn't have fit in the cockpit. Here you
Anyone
go.
has a suggestion?
That help?
Oh, okay. I might know.
Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Clint Eastwood.
he got it.
That's how he started, killing a tarantula.
Clint
That's where he
Eastwood.
perfected his squinty-eyed look. Well, nature does, tarantulas, I say, they're not very good fighters and they have a lot of predators they have to be careful of. And one of them is not a jet fighter dropping bombs, but this is nature's version. Want to tell us a little bit about this guy, Liz?
This is a Tarantula Hop Wasp. And this is one of the biggest predators, well, to the tarantula. And it's kind of a sad story what happens, but
Well,
they will come out. The females will. What? I'm sorry.
well, go ahead. You do. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead. You could do. I know what you're going to
No,
say.
we're
So
saying
go
the
ahead.
same things, just in different order.
What is it?
Oh no, this is milkweed. This is,
Oh.
you see, and if though anybody grows milkweed in their garden, you can get an idea how huge this thing is.
Wow.
This is the gigantic wasp, several inches long, with a stinger that's 3/4 of an inch long. And notice it's got nature's warning colors, orange and this dark bluish black. Go ahead, Liz, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So
Fortunately, they have nothing to do with people for us. Go ahead. Sorry.
So the tarantula hop wasp, what they do is they go out looking for tarantulas, and they will go and find one, and they will sting them, paralyze them. And I have heard, Ken could talk about how that the sting is extremely painful. And I don't know, Ken, if you want to mention the sting.
Yeah, so it's the female tarantula hawk wasp that's flying around. She's looking for male tarantulas that are wandering, and then she finds one, she attacks. And that's a big wasp, but that's a bigger spider. But remember, tarantulas aren't good fighters, and he'll go up and try to scare her off. And the minute he does that, as Liz says, the wasp stings him under one of his legs. And in about 1.5 seconds, he's totally paralyzed. Still alive, but paralyzed. She drags him off. He finds a little hole in the ground, or she digs out a little burrow and she pushes him in. And then she covers him up alive, buries him alive. But before she buries him, she does something. Why did she go to all that trouble to catch a tarantula if she wasn't going to eat it?
A female.
She lays an egg. And then she covers it up. And when that egg hatches, it eats that poor tarantula alive, saving the vital organs to last. I think, Liz, it's a process that takes several weeks, kind of excruciating. He's aware of what's going on. He just can't move. Now, what's even stranger, she's already mated, but she hasn't let the eggs be fertilized. So she gets to choose the sex of her baby. Listen to this, Jesse. If she finds a big plump tarantula and subdues it, she'll lay an unfertilized egg to produce a female, because the female is going to have to feed on that plump tarantula, and the wasp has to be bigger and stronger to be able to fight the male tarantulas. If she finds a scrawny tarantula walking around, she'll lay a fertilized egg for a male, because they can be wimpy and get away with it. So, as I say, they have no interest in people. I know of one bite was from a gentleman who's my age now. When he's young, he was a budding entomologist. He had a paper route, and he was delivering papers, and he saw a tarantula hawk wasp. He wanted it for his collection, and he knew he shouldn't do it, but he tried to grab it, and it stung him. And he said it was excruciating. He was incapacitated for about a half an hour. And then he got up and finished his paper route. He was fine, and just a little redness. So it's a very interesting venom. It completely immobilizes you, but does no tissue damage, because that Pepsis wasp doesn't want to damage the spider that its babies are going to feed on. So actually, scientists, probably with the Defense Department, are working on the venom of the tarantula hawk wasp right now. Not like with the tarantula for good, but for probably for nefarious purposes. And how bad does the tarantula wasp sting hurt? Well, there's this fellow named Justin Schmidt, who is 3 Sheets to the Wind. He's an entomologist, kind of famous. He's written a few books, and he studies ants and wasps and bees. And several years ago, he decided it would be interesting to let every one of those insects he studies in a step sting him, and then rate the sting according to painfulness, which he did. We went from 1 to 4.
Ken, it's hard to hear you. Did you?
Uh-oh, yeah, it's Saturday
go.
morning there.
Now it's
You
thank
hear,
you.
got leaf blowers and lawnmowers going on outside. Can you hear now?
Yes.
I can go close the window too.
No, I think it was just something that was blocking the audio,
Okay.
but it's good now.
Okay. So you see, now I lost my train of thought. Oh, how bad. So he let everything sting him and he rated them from 1 to 4, 1 being, nothing to worry about and 4 being really bad news. And just for scale, all of our local bees and our wasps, if you've been stung before, they're all range from 1.5 to 2. So you can imagine what the others are that are higher. There was actually only 1 4 in North America. It was the Tarantula Hop Wasp. And here's what Justin Schmidt had to say about us being stung by a Tarantula Hop Wasp. Blinding, fierce, shockingly electric. A running hairdryer has been dropped into your bubble bath. If you get stung by one, you might as well just lie down and scream. Yeah, it looked like, here's the trail we use, and it looks like Liz has found something else rather interesting. What could it be? Well, you wouldn't want to pick up a tarantula hawk wasp or even get near one. And you probably leave the tarantulas alone just because they're scary looking. But here's one that's kind of an attractive nuisance. This cute, fuzzy little guy. Looks like a toy ant that you might give a baby. But although you might be tempted to pick it up and maybe pet it, you wouldn't want to do that. It's called a velvet ant. And it's actually a wingless wasp. And it crawls around looking for little burrows to crawl into and sting the inhabitants to death and devour them. That's another common name is cow killer. Now it doesn't kill cattle, but when they've been stung, it's likely to start a stampede. That's how bad it hurts. It was actually a number 3. It was one of the few number 3s around. Justin Schmidt described it as explosive and long lasting. You sound insane as you scream. Hot oil from the deep fryer spilling over your entire hand. So, Liz, what are we trying to look at here?
I know it's really camouflaged, but it looks like a scorpion.
Why don't you go ahead? I'll go close the window.
Oh, you. Well, when we do some of our evening walks, we will permission the park. We will go and stay a little bit after dark, and we will have these UV lights, and we will go ahead once it gets dark and look for these scorpions out there. And if these guys, they're in the picture is much bigger than actually what you see there in the park. They're smaller. And they come out to have, when you put the flashlight onto them, this is the color that they will typically come out. So Ken, you want to talk about?
So they glow under UV light, which is rather odd. You wouldn't see them during the day, and at night they glow under UV light. That was actually discovered by geologists who were on some gem finding expedition. And when you use the UV light to help find the gems, you can imagine them sitting around a campfire, and someone has to go up and answer the call of nature, takes this UV light instead of his flashlight by mistake and shines it and sees a UV light, sees a scorpion there. Must have got a start. But the question's always been, why do they do that? What good does it do them? I mean, during the day is when the UV light is out with the sun, right? What good does it do to glow under UV light at night? There's no UV light, but actually there is. It's the most common wavelength of light at night. We don't see it, but there's UV light from reflection off the moon, from sunlight, and from the stars. So there is UV light around, and it's always been a mystery why the scorpions do that. And finally, there's a lot of theories, the best one being they just do it. But finally, there was some entomologist that did a study, arachnologist, and they actually blindfolded scorpions. But don't think about that too much. I think they used aluminum foil. And they shined UV light on the scorpions. And the scorpions reacted. They scurried away. And then I back up a little bit. What happens, scorpions don't see UV light either. And what you're looking at is not UV light, it's a bluish green light that's being reflected. There's chemicals in their exoskeleton, the scorpion's exoskeleton, that convert UV light to blue-green light. That's what bounces back. That's what they see, and that's what we see. It's a cyan light, like with the with like the printer cartridges. So yeah, so cyan is really a real color. It's just not something you have to pay $30 for to get the cartridge. So so what's going on? So they blindfolded the scorpion and they shined UV light on, and it reacted. It kind of scurried away. And then they just tried it with blue-green light, and it reacted even stronger. And what they concluded was it wasn't something that the scorpions were sensing through their eyes, and even something they had to see. It was going straight to their nervous system. And if there was UV light that was visible that night, say from a full moon, converted to the blue-green light into the scorpion's nervous system, it was letting them know that they were out in the open and they were liable to get caught, maybe by a tarantula or something else. And they better scurry away until they didn't detect that light anymore, usually under a rock or in a crevice. So that was their best guess. One of the Liz, in one of our last presentations, Liz talked a little bit about bats. We do have a bat on Mount Diablo that loves to eat scorpions. It's called the Pallid Bat. It's one of the whispering bats. The Pallid Bat has echolocation, but it doesn't use it to find food. It turns it way down. It just uses the echolocation to avoid crashing into trees. It flies a few feet off the ground and it uses its great ears. And it can actually hear beetles and scorpions scurrying along the ground. And when it hears one, it lands and it chases down the scorpion. It's actually immune to scorpion venom. The scorpions on Mount Diablo have venom. It's not dangerous to people. So that's one of the main predators of scorpions on Mount Diablo are the pallid bats. And it's quite interesting, something that researchers just learned. Sometimes during the fight, the stinger, the tail will break off the scorpion. It's not like a Western fence lizard. They don't do it on purpose. But sometimes when the bat is left with the stinger in its mouth, the rest of the scorpion can scurry off, and it's not necessarily fatal right away. Those tailless scorpions can go on living for months. I mean, they're at a disadvantage. They don't have that stinger. They have to use their claspers up in front, their front to catch food, but they can live for months at a time. The problem is, and this is a little bit gross, they poop through their tail. So they can't go anymore. And what eventually kills them after several months, they constipate to death. So, see, your mother was right. Your grandmother was right. You can die of constipation. And in the case of a scorpion, no, prune juice or Metamucil isn't going to help. It's just going to make it worse because you're not going to be able to go. But there's a case of a critter constipating to death. Let's see, we got time for one more, I think. I just wanted to mention this very last thing. This has found something else dangerous on the trail. Occasionally we see rattlesnakes. And we have the Northern Pacific rattlesnake on Mount Diablo, and just like the tarantula, they get a really bad rap. They're not an aggressive rattlesnake. I don't know of anyone that they'll try not to be seen. They'll try to get away. There's only a few instances of someone being bitten by a Northern Pacific rattlesnake in this locale. It's not fatal. And again, like tarantulas, it's quite scary. And again, like tarantulas, poor William Brewer had a very close encounter. he described getting off his horse on Mount Diablo one day with the rest of the group and feeling something squishy under his feet. And he looked down and sure enough, he had stepped off with both feet on a rattlesnake, which must have been quite a start. Well, they quickly killed the rattlesnake and they cut off the head and the rattle for souvenirs. But then they felt kind of bad about it. These guys being scientists, just wanton killing. So Brewer went back to measure the rattlesnake for science. And he described bending down to measure the rattlesnake. And as he bent down, he said the decapitated body coiled up and struck at him. And he said it was several moments before I could compose myself enough to get back on my horse. Probably had to change his pants. But these guys also get a bad rap, as I say. Rattlesnakes, they're actually like tarantulas. They're very good moms. They're reptiles, and you figure, well, they lay the eggs in a nest and cover it, and then they slither away. That's not true with rattlesnakes. They give birth to live young, which is unusual for reptiles. And it's not the same. It's not the same as mammals. Not the same as placental bonding between the baby and the mom. What the rattlesnakes do, they have soft-shelled eggs that they carry in their body. They protect the eggs, and when it's time for the babies to be born, out come the soft-shelled eggs, and they hatch right away, right there in front of the mom, and she'll guard the babies for several weeks until they've done their first shedding. So they're very good moms too. So Jessie, who I guess I can say Jessie, is about to become a mom for the first time. You could not pick a better example of motherhood than tarantulas and rattlesnakes. This guy here, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? Here's this cute little ground squirrel, which they're a keystone species. They're very important in the area. A lot of animals depend on them, except it's really the rattlesnakes are some of the predators that keep them from becoming overabundant, because when they become overabundant, they become an agricultural pest and they can carry many diseases, including bubonic plague, the ground squirrels can. And it's become such a problem, in the 1920s in the Bay Area, it became a real problem with the ground squirrels. And remember Herbert Hoover's famous saying was, when he ran for president, what was it? Chicken in every pot and 2 cars in every garage. Well, his second saying, which was famous in California, he said it was the patriotic duty of every Californian to kill a ground squirrel. And the problem is here's our local rattlesnake, and here's 2 ground squirrels that appear to be abusing that poor rattlesnake. And they are. Our local ground squirrels have developed a resistance to the venom of our local rattlesnake. And what these 2 guys are trying to do is keep that snake from their burrow. The baby ground squirrels don't have the immunity. So these 2 are sitting there kicking dirt on that poor rattlesnake and biting it. And this guy is waving its tail up in the air. It's called tail flagging. Rattlesnake doesn't see visually all that well, but it's got that infrared pits. It can detect temperature changes, which is very handy in hunting warm-blooded critters. But now it's seeing 3 targets there, including a huge one back there. So pity the poor rattlesnake. And in the very few times we've seen him, this was on one of the outings that Liz led over in Sycamore Grove Regional Park in Livermore. This trail's right here, and everybody walked past that rattlesnake that just stayed perfectly still. And I was the first one. I was the trail sweep. I saw it, and once it had gone by, it continued moving off into the brush, and that's the last we saw of it. And I think I'll skip over the last 2 here, except to mention, here's another Greenbelt Alliance former employee, Jesse, I got Jessie on the brain, Sarah Bars, who used to work in communication. She checked her the fine print in her job description, and then she was lucky it didn't say moving tarantulas, but it did say moving gopher snakes to safety. And Liz is staying far back. So that's I just wanted to mention, we'll do these another time. We talked a little bit about William Brewer. If you're interested in California history, all that journal that he kept while he was with the Geologic Survey and all the letters he wrote back to his brother in New York. Eventually, they were put together in a book called Up and Down California, which is a very interesting book and very insightful and kind of witty about what California was like in the 1860s, at least through the eyes of an Easterner. It's still in print. Now this is Yale University, but now it's UC Press. So you can still get it and you can get it online. And I mention that because I used to know Barbara Brewer Smith, who was William Brewer's she told me great grandniece. It must have been great. But she was quite the character. She was one of the early presidents of the Mount Diablo Interpretive Association, and she was active in other environmental causes. And she had been a school teacher, and she used to always delight in telling me what her Uncle Willie had said about this or that, and when he visited California. And one thing, and she passed away earlier this year. She was just 1 month shy of her 96th birthday. But one thing that Barbara was always adamant about, she would always tell me that Uncle Willie was not afraid of tarantulas. So I'll give Barbara the last word on that. And this was dedicated to you, Barbara. So that'll do it. A little bit long, I'm sorry. Not Liz's fault, that was me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ken and Liz, for this wonderful presentation and demystifying all these misunderstood little animals. We do have a few questions that came through from Fiorella. Let me just share them with you very quickly right now. All of them are from Fiorella. So she asked, the tarantula, so they only use their fangs for feeding?
They use their fangs for digging their burrows too. That's what they dig with.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
feeding.
go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, and, actually the venom is so mild that when they catch something, they're big spiders, they actually pound it to death. The venom is just used for dissolving it afterwards. So even if you could, I do know a few people that had been bitten. It wasn't the tarantula's fault. And they were actually trying to get bit, and they said it was less than a bee sting, and it wasn't even red 5 minutes later. So that's when you might not even notice. So they're scary looking, but yeah.
Okay. And then she also asked, all scorpions die of constipation if
No,
it's a natural death?
no, they just die if they get their tails ripped off.
If they get their
Yeah,
tails ripped
they
off.
live several years too, and they molt. They're the same arachnids like tarantulas. This was just interesting. Somebody was observing this phenomena, and it's not like fence lizards. They don't do it on purpose, but if the tail should be ripped off, it's not necessarily the stinger, not necessarily fatal. They will die, but it's not at the moment. It takes several months, and it's from constipation because they can't get rid of the waste products anymore. So yeah, no, they that's unusual. And yeah.
Okay, so I think we went through all the questions. Let me just check.
Constipation and fangs. Does anybody have anything about the alcoholic content of tarantula juice for Liz?
Okay. Any last comments, Liz or Ken? I don't see anything else.
I
Oh,
think
well,
Ken is.
check. If you go on the Greenbelt Alliance website, greenbelt.org, you can see our wildfire white paper, which is this time with all that's going on, it's extremely important. We have other information dealing with climate change and Greenbelt Alliance, what Greenbelt Alliance is working on now. If you click on the events, events tag in the outings portion, you can see all our on the ground outings that'll be coming up in the next couple months. And Jesse has informed me that tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, there'll be one other added to the one other outing added to the page at Liz's Tarantula Walk, which is on September 5th.
Yes, an in-person tarantula walk. So
So you can meet Scarlett O'Hare. I also have a tarantula. It's named Trumpy. That tells you all you need to know about the character of that tarantula I've got.
Yeah, if you're feeling brave enough now that you know that they are not, that venomous or that intimidating, you can join the in-person outing that's coming in September. All are invited. So,
And Jesse put the in the chat. Jesse had put the link to the website.
exactly. I'm also pasting into the chat the link to the events and outings. So thank you, everyone. We are a little bit over. Liz, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, one thing I want to say about tarantulas that just to kind of end with this, that more and more species, what I'm hearing of tarantulas, are becoming endangered. And so please, if you're out there, Mount Diablo State Park or wherever, just enjoy them from afar. And you could go ahead, like Ken and I both have bought our tarantulas at pet stores, what have you. We did not pick them up from the wild. So definitely they're wonderful creatures. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Thank you very much, Liz. I see that most people stayed with us until now. So thank you very much, everyone, for spending your Saturday morning with us. Just a reminder that in case you missed it in the beginning, that we did record this presentation. We're going to share the recording link with you in a follow-up email later today. So look out for that. And you can always support our work by donating, signing up for our newsletters, and following us on social media to check out upcoming events and outings that we're back with in-person outings now. So be sure to check out because we have limited capacity for in-person outings and they usually sell out quick. So that's all from us. We hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Ken and Liz.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.